Hey, hello, and howdy. Will Frazier here from Craftsman Real Estate Services, and let's begin our journey. And as you know, I love accents. I'm not good at them necessarily, but I love them. And where all great stories start, of course, is at the beginning. So let's start by going back to the yesteryears and the beginning of communication. Well, we're not going to go that far back, but in order to wrap our minds around what I want to talk through today with communication and specifically the word asynchronous versus synchronous, like what's the opposite of asynchronous? It's just live on demand. So asynchronous communication versus communication as it was. So in order to wrap our minds around the scenario that we're in, what we're all steeped in right now, all day, every day, we need to go back to the very beginning of modern communication. And by modern, I mean not smoke signals, not, like banging sticks on cave walls so that the next cave down the valley heard it, like whatever. Like I'm talking about you and I and our ancestors. How do we communicate? And part of the reality that they lived in before this, and then this and this, the high-speed scanner that I have, the car keys that I have to my vehicle that drives ridiculously fast and takes me anywhere in the city or other cities or other countries in a day. Before all of this evolution of technology happened, our ancestors were confined to where they could realistically walk to in a day, or ride a horse to, or a camel, or whatever. Like they had these confines that limited what was possible. And so those confines created a context for communication. So if you wanted to tell your friend something was funny, but that friend was a 2-hour walk through a dangerous desert. So, 4 hours round trip, danger both ways. Would you go knock on their door, potentially them not be there because you can't give them a heads up because you don't have a phone, you can't text them, you can't tweet them, you can't post on their Instagram that they just posted, that you could see that they were obviously at their house, and you say, hey, is this live? Like, you can't do that, so you're just gonna have to take off. So you wouldn't do that. Probably you wouldn't go without purpose to a far off place. Now the question of, like, what about nearby things? Did you live with that intentionality and that purpose with nearby things? And still, the barrier of separation, the time and intentionality barrier of separation, created context for communication. Do I want to go to their house or go down the street or go to the market and tell someone this? Okay, well, is it worth it? It created a context wherein we judged the worthiness or the unworthiness of communication. And then fast forward for the advent of the telegraph, was probably one of the earlier high-speed, long-distance communications. So all of a sudden, instead of, when the first transatlantic, I think it was the big noteworthy telegraph that went between Britain and somewhere, for the first time, instead of getting on a ship and spending weeks crossing a channel or an ocean, months crossing an ocean, you send some electric signals, they go, and within a few hours, or probably hours, they were received. Like, that's revolutionary. That's amazing. The cost, the human capital cost, the human risk, the human time, like, those are what I mean by human capital. The lives spent to communicate a message from this place to that place reduced significantly. And that's awesome. It really is awesome. Like, I don't say anything that I say today to diminish or reduce the impressiveness or the impact and the utility of technology along the way. We just want to explore the context that we're steeped in. So from that point on, lots of other pieces of information, and actually from well before that, the invention of the printing press, several different key iterative innovations and inventions throughout time have increased the speed and the ease with which things can be communicated. And when that happens, it decreases the cost, both in real, sometimes in real paper terms, but in human capital cost. As we've gotten deeper into the technological age of exponential innovation and lots of different things that typify our world today, where things are massively overhauled every 5 to 15 years, we have become accustomed to the idea that the the slight iterations that have happened in the past are just normative. And so, when the telegraph came, it's like, okay, that's disruptive. And now the embracing of the telegraph as a normal thing is normal. Like, obviously, we have technology, why not use it? And so, fast forward to the telephone. So, when telephones first came about, something that I've heard from my parents that's been a really cool journey to journey with them in is that you didn't have a telephone in your home. Well, they can remember when that happened, but you had someone in the neighborhood had a telephone, and that was a special thing. And then a later invention was the party line. Well, now everyone's got a telephone, or most people, and they could afford it, had a telephone in their home, but you didn't have an exclusive line. And so it was like this social event. Like when the phone rang, everyone is excited, and they picked it up and determined at that point who it was to. And then later that became privatized. Now, instead of having a party line where it rings and the operator tells you which house it's for, you've got your own dedicated phone. Like, oh, that's cool. Like, what a great riff off of what was. Now we've got private communication. And so that became, so thinking before telephones were in every home to the point where they were in every home, private telephones in every home. The human capital cost of communicating something from Sally Sue to Becky was relatively high to very low, like relatively low. Like you still had to have a phone, you still had to have permission, you had to have access to it. Becky had to be home, all these things. But compared to having to go to Becky's house, Sally Sue would look at the phone and say, I can call this number and it's going to go to Becky's house and directly to her house. It happens instantaneously. I don't have to leave my house. My dad won't let me do that after dark anyway, so because it's dangerous for me and blah, blah, blah. And so this is easy. This is light. This is good. And so we take these technologies and we say, oh, it's possible, therefore it's good. So then we fast forward and we take that phone, and I'm going to speed up here so this doesn't become a reproduction of the actual time it took to do these innovations. But we fast forward and we take that phone and we put it in your car. We take that phone, we put it in, your office was the next thing. And so now you don't even have to be away from home all day because you've got the ability to call home. So anyone that's at home can call the office and vice versa. We take that in between, that commute, pesky commute where you're going to the office, you're going to the store, and we say, hey, let's connect that too. We put those bag phones. Remember those old bag phones that used to sit in our parents' vehicles? Like, hey, no worries in the 20 minutes between home and work, or work and Walmart, or Walmart and the pet store. Like, don't worry, you're connected. And then we took that bag phone and we stuck it in our pockets. And then we took that phone that was in our pockets where you had to have like a number to. And then we got that. And so today, I have a client that's called in the last hour, a client that's called, a text message from a deal, a notification from Amazon that our package is on the way, a notification from an app that their town hall meeting is starting in an hour, and then update on a sale that's going on, and my expense tracking software, and then a WhatsApp, an iMessage, a text message. This app wants to update. This showing request happened, on and on. So think about that evolution from like, man, I gotta walk to my friend's house. So what's the cost? Like, what's the import of this piece of information? Is it worth the risk that they won't be home? Is it worth the investment of time and security to go to their house to communicate this piece of information? No. Okay, I won't do it. But the presence of barriers help to create context for our communication. Fast forward to today, what we have is a society where anyone can get in touch with anyone instantaneously all across the world. And while that is amazing, and while there are some very, very cool, very impressive realities that come along with that, it's also amazingly, amazingly inefficient. Because when there's no cost associated with communicating a message, then we don't have the context we need to know whether it's important or relevant or worth communicating or not. And so, where do we find that information? Well, likes, follows, subscriptions. If you're here, please subscribe. That would be cool. Responses to a text message. Where do we find out whether our communication was appropriate? Well, 20 years ago, we would look towards these clues. We would look for data sets and we would say, is this relevant communication? Still intensely difficult because we've detached it from all the costs of communication, but we still have this idea that communication happens. If communication is to happen, it needs to be relevant. But then we create a situation, thanks to different social media platforms and Twitter, most notably, and then Facebook integrated this into the feed, and then the rest is history, that says that you and what you need to say and me and what I want to say are important. Period. End of statement. It's important, y'all, because you are you and you're a snowflake and I'm a freaking rainbow, like with a unicorn on both ends. And so what you and I have to say is beautiful, blissful importance. And if anyone says otherwise, they're a freaking bully. So that became the subconscious narrative that when we took words and we detached them from the people, the credibility of the speaker, and then we let words bounce around in the ecosystem, insane things happen. Insane things. Like insane things. Won't even go into it. It's a different rabbit trail altogether. But the point that I want to lay foundation for here is that the idea that anyone can reach out to anyone instantaneously all across the world, thanks to the technology we have today, on its own is amoral. It's not immoral, it's not moral, it's just amoral. It does not in itself have a moral stance to it. But I would insert and insist on that an understanding that for us to continually operate in a way in which anyone at any point in time with no cost associated with it can approach us, can snag our attention, can communicate to us, is a ridiculous way to live and in an efficient way to live, in a fantastic way to become obese, divorced, and broke, which is normative of Americans. Obese, divorced, and broke. Like statistically, normative for our culture. Probably, if we look at it, normative for the Western world. Why would that be normative for our culture? Why would that be normative for the Western world? There are many, 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 many very deep trails that we could take off of this path. But I want to stay on this path and say, hey, we'll explore those in a later date. And you can pull some threads on some of the people like Jordan Peterson, and some of these people who are exploring this like full time. This is what they do, and there's some amazing things that are coming to light as to why we're here. Why are we in this situation? And it's not technology's fault. It's technology itself is amoral, but the way that we have failed to adapt our expectations around communication has allowed technology to steamroll us. And so what I want to talk through today are a couple points around an understanding that asynchronous communication is a wise and profitable path in some contexts. And I would argue that the context in which asynchronous communication like this is a wise and profitable form of communication is broader than we give it credit for. So, asynchronous communication means, in essence, boiled down, very simple, communication that does not depend on the observer, the watcher, the listener to be live at the time of communication. A phone call is not asynchronous. A text message is asynchronous. A office drop by, not asynchronous. A email or an email is asynchronous. And yes, we can know just from my use of text message and email as the lead-ins here that there are some massive pitfalls to asynchronous communication. And I know that there is more to be gained from the other senses being involved with communication than email and text message can give us that are so valuable, like seeing and hearing, hopefully not smelling or feeling, but seeing and hearing alone can add so much depth, so much important, valuable context to communication that I think that's why so often we default to, hey, let's just hop on a call. Hey, let's just meet. But what I would argue is that there are so many very valuable contexts in business and in day-to-day life where the important thing is not the enjoyment of the communication. It's not the transmission of the words, but it's the timely deliverance of the right content. And so, to that end, what I would say is that if we will be more open handed with the way we expect other people to interface with us, and if we will be more guarded of our time, of our focus and attention, and uh, of our lives, of the margin of our lives. And when I say margin, the reality is we have almost none of it. And not because that's the way it is, but because we take the margin. Man, I wish I had my calendar in front of me. We take the margin and all that empty space and we fill it with crap like Netflix, like everything that I just read on my phone, except for the one client call, like that one thing in a feed of 7 or 8 from the last hour is important. Only the one. All the others is someone trying to sell me something. Same for you. When we take our schedules and we have the necessary things, and then we're not disciplined to set up boundaries to protect the other things, then the other things become filled with someone else's priorities, someone else's marketing strategy, or someone else's agenda. But if we will be disciplined, intentional to set those boundaries and to uphold them, then we will find ourselves able to walk in our priorities far more. And so let me give you a real life example of this. I'm a real estate agent. I'm a broker. As a broker, for example, one of the most common things that happens is other brokers will call me to chew me out about something that I or my agent did. And instead of quickly communicating the facts or the story or the thoughts, we spend days trying to hop on a phone call. Here's why. Number one, because I guard my freaking time. Not perfectly, not even super well, but well enough to have buckets that things in my work life can fit into. And if you're in that bucket and you're a lower priority, then I'm going to give you the lower value time. Unlike, say, client Pam, who called that as soon as I'm done here, I'm calling Pam. Why? Because value lies in the right buckets. And when someone or something has proven to be a valuable thing, or it's planned to be a focus, then hey, you have access to this. But still, like let's take this as an example. Client Pam called when I was 5 minutes onto this podcast or this episode. So what do? Because the incessant, never stopping insistence that the phone is the right and holy form of communication would say that to be unreachable, and this is the rhetoric that goes around in real estate, like, I mean, it's just like unquestioned, but to be reachable is to be valuable. So the rhetoric would say that if I'm unreachable right now, if I dwell in asynchronous communication, if I don't have will on tap, then I am worthless. That would lead to less content. That stack of books back there, there's 3 of them. Those are books that I'm reading right now. And what happens as a result of those books? I read these books and I learn something. I become better, more humble, more honest, more grounded, more developed, more aware, whatever. And I connect these dots. And does client Pam profit from that, or is she disserved by that? No, like, she benefits because as I become better, the people I serve become better served. But what happens if we don't guard? What happens if we don't utilize things like time blocking, working in our priorities? What happens if we don't say no to the incessant, never stopping demands of every social media company, every person, every telemarketer, every one that wants something from you on demand? Well, even if you red button the calls, even if every one of them you red button, you are losing attention. You are losing focus, and you are losing the ability to use what God has given you that mirrors him and that literally like images him in some ways. You are losing the ability to use it well, because we can't be constantly inundated with distractions, even if we don't attend to them. Just the sound of that phone vibrating across my desk, even if I don't listen to it, will delay my speech, will put gaps in my thoughts, because I was subconsciously on a train of thought, and then my mind attends to it. I make value-based decisions about, am I going to listen to this? No, I'm not going to check it. Okay, I'm back. Even though that happens fast, it distracts from the attention. It's attention residue. Now my attention residue is on that call and not on this. And why you are watching this right now is to gain something of value. Bless you for that. And thank you for being part of this journey with me. That's awesome. So I want to give you the value that you want to get, and not learn about some sale, or hear about why someone else is pissed off because their people didn't do their job, because they hired agents who think that monetizing their social circle is the thing in real estate, and they spend their time being very synchronously available. So you can call, Raj anytime, and you can get him, and he'll go show you a house. He's super available. He's super hungry. And people think that Raj thinks that, everyone thinks that is value. But in fact, do you want to work with anyone in any context who is super available, unintentional, not in demand? Or would you rather work with someone who, yes, it might take you 5 days to get on a phone call with them if you insist on doing that, but in your inbox, they have the communication that's needed in a way that gives full light to the communication? Would that be better? Like, would you rather insist on syncing up schedules, which, by the way, if you've been around very many people who have a lot of demands on their time, you know that 2 people who have a lot of demands on their time trying to find the same open spots on a schedule, especially in different stages of life, or in the same stages of life, or just in general, it's hard. But what's not hard is person one sending an email. Let's say you subscribe to BombBomb and you send a personal video email to them and say, you know, hey, this is Raj. I hear you're looking to find a home that you guys love. And hey, I just want to say it'd be a pleasure to work with you. And would you mind giving me some light, giving me some depth and breadth to what you're envisioning when you say you want a home? Would you mind fleshing that out to me? And then they sit on the couch, type up exactly what's their dream home. Like, is that successful communication? Or is that unsuccessful communication? Because what goes around in real estate and what goes around in legal and what goes around in every other type of industry that I know of, with very few exceptions, is the idea that no, that needs to happen with a phone call. But, Tony and Sarah work 9 to 5, so it needs to happen 7 p.m. Doesn't matter that Raj has a marriage, 3 kids, one of them's an infant, and the other just started high school. Whatever. It doesn't matter what that is. It needs to happen on their terms or on his terms, and that insistence on our terms instead of the willingness to use asynchronous communication is a liability, and it's a way that we're failing to adapt to the modern world in a way that is light and efficient. And so I think that the point and the kind of the way I'm going to summarize my first point here is that asynchronous communication can provide the right information at the right time to truly be on demand. Once I send you a video email, it's in your inbox, period. You choose when you use it. You choose when you need it. You can rewatch it a dozen times. Guys,